Welcome, everybody. We are episode 3 of the Zero Hedge podcast, hosted by me, Rob Bernstein. Today, I'm joined by my friend Kyle from the Libertarian Institute, who seems to know everything about foreign affairs, so it's a pleasure to have you on, my friend.
Thanks for having me, Robbie.
All right, so obviously, everyone's a little bit nervous about this Iran situation. Clear escalations. We're now at war. And my first question for you is, do you think Trump knew about this ahead of time?
I think he did. I guess there could be some question and some debate over how far ahead of time he knew this was going to happen. Did he just know a few days ahead of time? Or did he know this essentially his entire presidency in the talks with Iran was all just an elaborate ploy to lower Tehran's guard in order to give Israel a better chance at attacking? Right after the attack, Israeli officials came out and did say that this was discussed between Trump and Netanyahu during a call the two leaders had a week ago today, or a week ago Monday, so just over a week ago now, and that it was planned from that time. And then there was some concern. Iran was getting kind of heightened on their alarms over some moves that were being made in the Middle East, including the U.S. issuing an evacuation order of its Middle East embassy and Iran embassy, not a full evacuation, like a voluntary one, removing the family members of the staff and things like that from the embassy. And then Trump put out another post saying that he was still committed to engaging with talks with Iran, and this was just a few hours before the Israeli attack started. And Israeli officials did say that Trump put out that warning intentionally to, make Iran less concerned that they were about to carry out an attack. And one more piece in all this that I think makes it pretty clear the U.S. knew ahead of time. One, Israel said that the U.S. helped to carry out intelligence, and two, the U.S. provided Israel with 300 precision Hellfire missiles the Tuesday before the strike happened, so a week ago today. And those type of missiles were used in the targeted assassinations that Israel carried out on the first day of the attack. And so certainly Trump knew the week ahead of time. It's just a question, again, how far ahead of time he knew.
So, I would have figured that Trump knew about this, because usually if people go behind Trump's back, he is vindictive and angry and will criticize and go to a level 12 until he gets distracted by something else and then moves on to that other thing. So it would seem to me if Witkoff was actually going to be engaging in the next round of negotiations, or they were extending it past the deadline, or they were still trying to have further conversations, and then Netanyahu said, hey, screw this, I'm bombing that country, that Trump would be on the news immediately going, we are done with Israel. I can't believe they did this. I would have had peace. I had a perfect peace plan. I have heard from individuals that seemingly this was a save face from Trump, that Trump didn't know that it was coming. But even that just seems too remarkable to me, that Israel has such a grip on Donald Trump that they can break with his wishes, and then Donald Trump will turn around and pretend like it was his idea the whole time because he thinks that looks better to the American people.
Yeah, I mostly agree with you. I did hear somebody say that at times when things don't go Trump's way, he'll just pretend that that's what he wanted all along in order to seem like he was pulling the strings and playing 75D chess and making all these very elaborate moves behind the scenes that sometimes you doubt if Trump is, mentally competent enough to really think through all that and make a decision like that. So, but I do agree with you. I think if this really wasn't something that Trump wanted, if he really thought he was on the cusp of getting a deal done and he wanted to get that deal done, I think he would have been upset with the Israelis. And again, with providing the intelligence, providing the weapons, being prepared so quickly to carry out defenses of Israel from the Iranian retaliatory missile strikes, I think suggests that the Trump knew this was coming, and that Israeli officials aren't lying when they say they got an explicit green light from the Trump administration on this.
All right, so my next question for you is, the Israelis seem to be doing well in this fight. I'm saying this amorally, so this is not a
battlefield assessment. I understand.
Yes, thank you. So, they've essentially taken out the Hamas threat. They've taken out the Hezbollah threat. So I think in other time periods, if they were attacking Iran, they probably would have had to deal with at least more from Hezbollah. Then we're in this new age of the drone warfare. This seems like there was something similar to what took place in Ukraine here, where they snuck drones into the country and I guess took out what otherwise would have prevented them from doing, I guess aerial assaults or whatnot. But maybe you can actually give us the breakdown of what Israel pulled off here, because they somehow tricked leaders into getting together, so they knew their precise locations. I guess they also took out air defenses, but maybe you could actually give us the breakdown of what their strategic strike what was that Israel did to start this off.
Yeah, and Robbie, I think you make a really good point off the bat here, that for the longest time, what we heard is that Israel could never pull off a strike like this on Iran because Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, Bashar al-Assad in Syria, Hamas in the Palestinian territories, particularly Gaza, would all stand up to Israel, and they would be essentially fighting a multi-front war. And that's not happening. Hezbollah is acting as if they've been completely beaten. The Houthis, Ansar Allah in Yemen, are firing a few missiles into Israel, but they're fairly far away, and their capabilities are somewhat limited. And so this really does seem to be a fight between the U.S. Backing Israel, and that's a pretty powerful force, and Iran. And at least in the initial attack, Israel seems to have delivered a fairly devastating blow. They hit and, as you mentioned, killed some Iranian leadership, particularly some top commanders of the IRGC and their missile and air defense and aerospace section of that branch of the Iranian military, which, is going to be important for Iran putting up a defense and then issuing a fairly quick response to Israel. There's also reports, and it seems to be true, the Mossad talked about this to the Associated Press, that they were able to smuggle some drones into Iran, and those drones were used to disable Iran's air defense systems, and also they used some electronic warfare against Iran's air defense systems. And so this, in some ways, seems to resemble the Operation Spiderweb that Ukraine recently carried out in Russia, where they took out some Russian nuclear bombers. And so that's, raises some curiosity and piques some interest, but is a separate issue from the question at hand. Now, Iran was able to, within, I say like 16, 18 hours, to start having air defensive activate against the Israeli incoming missiles and aircraft. They have claimed to have shot down, I believe, 1 or 2 F-35s. I haven't seen any confirmation of that at this point. I think it's entirely possible that it either did or didn't happen. But the Iranian air defenses have been active. They have been able to down some of the incoming Israeli bombs and missiles. And, more importantly, Iran has been able to conduct some fairly substantial missile barrages and do real damage to Israeli cities. This is important, right? That Israel, Hamas has fired rockets into Israel for years and years and years, but those are small rockets that, they'll hit a structure with people inside and they won't kill the people inside, where the Iranian missiles are massive. I think hundreds of people now have been injured in Israel. Certainly a dozen or so have been killed by the Iranian strikes. Israel is being pretty tight-lipped about the damage. They're trying to prevent any kind of media or even their own citizens from publishing the videos of the Iranian missiles incoming and the strikes. They say this is because it allows Iran to better calibrate their missiles. I'm sure there's some truth to that, but mostly it's about narrative control and trying to be able to downplay the extent of the Iranian hits in Israel. And so, Robbie, I think I tend to lean in the direction that you described it, that this really has been a pretty successful mission so far for Israel, and they would seem to be maybe not on the verge of a victory, but certainly are going to give better than they get in this exchange. That being said, Israel's air defenses are very expensive and very elaborate, and there are a limited number of air defenses in the West. Israel recently phased out the Patriot missile systems and shipped their Patriot missiles off to Ukraine. There are American THAAD, the Iron Dome and the David Sling systems all active in Israel. But there are a limited number of those interceptors, and they are very expensive to make and to continue to fire. And as Iran, unleashes more advanced missiles in their attacks on Israel, their interceptors are having a harder time hitting them. Certainly, some of their interceptors have been hit, and also it seems pretty common to have malfunctions with these interceptor systems. There's a video of, I believe it's an Israeli Arrow system, where the missile malfunctions and then drops down back on the interceptor launcher itself and destroys it. And so if Israel loses the ability to have air defense over its own skies, or a more limited capability to do so, Israel's a much smaller country than Iran. It's I think 8 million people compared to 80 million people. It's just the size disparity is massive. Iran is a very mountainous country, and we have seen for the past decade the Saudis, the Americans, and the Israelis all bomb the Houthis, Ansar Allah, in northern Yemen, and in no success in dislodging them or preventing. The Houthis are still launching missiles at Israel. I mean, it's absolutely unbelievable. The U.S. spent a month dropping 1,000 bombs on that country, and they're still able to attack Israel. And in part, it's because a lot of their missile launchers are hidden in the mountains, and their air defense systems are hidden in the mountains. And Iran has some of the same terrain, and I would guess the ability to hide their launchers and to hide their missiles and their air defenses. And so if the U.S. doesn't directly enter on the side of Israel, because obviously that really changes the game, right? If you're going to have B-52s and these massive U.S. bombers dropping 30,000-pound bombs onto Iran, that's really going to change the game. But assuming the status quo stays here, Israel could find itself in real trouble, even though at this point does seem that they have, in all these exchanges, they're giving better than they're getting.
All right. I have two questions top of mind. I'm almost debating which one I want to ask first, but let's go with this one. Maybe I have my facts wrong on this, but I thought the pitch from Israel, as of a month ago, was essentially the same story of, hey, this is the last and final hour for us to stop them, and we can stop them with strategic strikes. We just need to be able to do it. And now it's already a couple days later, and essentially it sounds like they had the strategic equipment to dismantle a lot of the Iranian program, but there's that one mountain that has some of the centrifuges that only America has the equipment to take out. So first and foremost, in this first round of attacks, if Israel's agenda was to, completely get rid of the nuclear program, have they done so? Or does this just kind of play into the theory of that Israel has been trying to pick a fight, so essentially America has to step in and then go fight it on their behalf?
Yeah, I think the facility you're referring to is Fordow, which is in a mountainous area. It's very deep. And yes, apparently it is going to take these 30,000-pound American bombs. I don't know, maybe Israel could use a nuclear weapon or something like that to hit the facility. They've apparently done some damage to the Natanz facility, although the extent of which is unclear. I heard the IAEA, that's the International Nuclear Watchdog, say that the physical condition of the facility was intact, that the centrifuges are far enough underground that it's not as if it blew up or was damaged by a fire, but the electricity and the other disruptions have likely damaged or destroyed a large number of the centrifuges in that facility. And so Fordow's the big facility left, and that is what the kind of consensus military opinion is. I don't know for sure, Robbie. I haven't done the calculations of how much rock there is between the ground and the top of this facility and what bomb it would take to hit it, but the consensus is it would take a 30,000-pound bomb dropped from an American heavy bomber, and those are two military capabilities that Israel does not possess, and so they would not be able to take out that facility themselves. And this was something that Tel Aviv obviously knew before they started their attack. In Haaretz, which is a more liberal Israeli outlet, there were multiple articles on Friday and Saturday pointing this out, that Israel has essentially bit off a war that they really can't finish on their own, and it's going to rely on American support. And there's also an article on this or I don't know if it was an article, but it was a post by an Israeli journalist on X who works for Ynet, which is, a more conservative and mainstream Israeli outlet. So this isn't somebody who is taking the anti-Netanyahu, a pro-Palestinian, pro-Iranian position. He's, I think, in favor of this war, but he's pointing out that ultimately Israel can't take out the Fordow facility without the American support. And also, there are a limited number of interceptors, and Iran has a lot of missiles. And so this could ultimately not work out for Israel unless the U.S. intervenes.
Real quick, I want to tell you guys about the Grid Doctor 3300 solar generator from My Patriot Supply. I'm sure you've got a lot of investments. You want to be prepared. And are you ready for life off the grid? Are you ready if the overlords just decide to turn off the energy on us? Are you ready if you get another one of these crazy storms that knocks out the electricity grid because these central planners aren't that good at managing our electric supplies? You don't want to be relying on government for your energy needs, and that's why I've got a simple solution for you, which is the Grid Doctor 3300 solar generator from My Patriot Supply. And here's what's great. Right now, if you act and you use my promo code, they're going to give you 2 waterproof 200-watt solar panels completely free. That's an $894 value. And guys, these are not cheap plastic. This is a high-quality, durable machine that if the energy goes off, you're going to be able to run your dishwasher, you're going to be able to run your oven, you're going to be the one guy in the block that's got the electricity when it goes out. So here's how you pick this bad boy up. You go to mypatriotsupply.com/Rob, which will let you grab these free solar panels, an $894 value. Once again, that's mypatriotsupply.com/Rob. And if there was ever a better time to get serious about blackout protection, this is it. Donald Trump's ramping up. That's what we're talking about at the world. And listen, you don't want to be relying on government for your energy needs. You want to be one of these cool people that knows that you could go out and live naked in the woods and be able to run an oven or call your friends or do whatever people like to do at the end of the world when they're hanging out naked in the woods. Or maybe you just got a house and you want to make sure you got a generator for it. Guys, I couldn't recommend this more. If you just like knowing that you can be self-reliant and you've got everything that you need. I personally got a whole closet full of My Patriot Supply end of the world food. And so go stock up right now. mypatriotsupply.com/Rob. All right, let's get back into the episode. All right, so just a couple more questions kind of about the strategics of the current situation, and then we can get into kind of the bigger story here. If America is already working with Israel, and let's go with the idea that Trump knew about this beforehand. Now, we already do a shady job of arming countries, giving them, intelligence, and then going, we're not in a fight with you. That's what we've been doing with Russia. And even in this Iran situation, Trump turned around after the first attack and said, hey, we didn't do that, so you better not touch any of our bases. Trump has also claimed that he can kill the leader, and this just shows what is that, the Ayatollah that he's claiming he could be killing? Okay. He's claiming that he could kill the Ayatollah, and then it also seems like with the, whatever the surface-to-air missiles or whatnot that's been taken out, America currently would be able to fly a bomber in there and be able to take out that underground nuclear facility. So with all that said, if the element of surprise existed 4 or 5 days ago before Israel first attacked, why not just do all of that and not have a war? It seems to me if your agenda is we want to make sure that these people will never have nukes, and you could have gotten it all done within the first strike, why not just end the situation right then and there? And then this is a bit of a part B, but I understand why if America has the ability to take out the leader, why is it make better strategic sense to try and leave that guy in place, who would seem to me would be the least likely to just go, all right, I fold, because as a dictator, it seems pretty hard to remain in power if you look that weak to your country.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of really good questions there, Robbie. I guess what the initial one is, I don't know. My instinct is maybe it seemed politically untenable in the United States for the U.S. to just launch a massive bombing campaign against a country that never attacked the United States. I mean, for all the complaining and apparent consensus in Washington that Iran was trying to build a nuclear weapon, they weren't. And so to attack Iran's nuclear facilities and launch an aggressive, undeclared offensive war against a country that hadn't attacked the United States of America is somewhat difficult. And maybe a part of my estimation here is that what they calculated is Iran or a Shia militia group, Hezbollah, one of the groups in Syria or Iraq, the Houthis in Yemen, somebody would take out their anger over Israel attacking Iran on the 50,000 American soldiers in the Middle East. And once one base is bombed that houses an American soldier, or, there's a few 100,000 Americans, people with dual American Israeli citizenship that live in Israel and are currently in Israel. And so once an Iranian missile lands in Israel and kills an American, then that's going to be the cover that the Trump administration needs to officially enter the conflict. And so maybe that was the political calculation there, that we will enter once an American dies somewhere in the Middle East.
All right. So then my next question for you is, this kind of proves my last theory correct, which was the last time that Iran was bombing Israel. I had said that this was war theater. They didn't want to actually hit anything, so they were purposely sending the stuff that wouldn't hit anything because they need to look strong at home. Their general, I think, had been taken out in Beirut, so they had to do something. And so they fired a whole bunch of missiles. They called ahead of time, said, hey, this is what we're going to be doing. And they didn't actually hit anything. And now it's escalated to where they are hitting things, so I think it's pretty evident that in the last time that they were striking Israel, they didn't actually have an interest. That's at least my takeaway. So with that said, it would appear to me that Iran is not looking for a bigger fight here because they know that I guess that's too costly for them. I don't think that they're looking to actually have a war with the U.S. And it even looks like with the Israel thing, they're not really looking for direct confrontations. So with that said, where do you think this is currently going? What's the pathway to even de-escalate, or what are kind of the de-escalation steps that we might see going back and forth?
Yeah, so just one quick correction there, Robbie. The Iranians, one of the reasons they attacked Israel the last time was Israel assassinated the political leader of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, who was in Tehran for the inauguration of the current Israeli president. And one of the reasons I want to point that out is to also mention that one of the people Israel killed in Iran was the man who was leading the nuclear negotiations with the United States. And a part of Iran's response to all of this is, by killing him, Israel effectively killed any chance for the U.S. and Iran to reach a deal. I'm sorry, I got sidetracked. What was your actual question? My question was,
how does this situation de-escalate, or what do you actually predict will be kind of the back and forth? Are we going to full-scale war with Iran? What are the steps that get us there? Or, does Iran actually just stand up and go, all right, we're done with our nuclear program, and that's the de-escalation? Like, how do we walk this back, or where do you actually think it's going?
Boy, I don't know. I think, unfortunately, the way the world is right now, you could maybe imagine a scenario where the U.S. and Russia are engaged in a proxy war over Ukraine, where Putin with leverage over Tehran, Washington with leverage over Tel Aviv, can all get together and really hammer out a deal here. It doesn't seem that there's anybody really in a position to not only rein in Tel Aviv, but also to act as a neutral mediator here, because any party that may act as a mediator, particularly Beijing or Moscow, is going to be rejected as a mediator by Washington, because we don't want to be seen as like losing influence if it is Xi that works out this deal to end this conflict instead of Trump. So that's one issue. The other issue is I don't think Israel is at all interested in de-escalating at this point. And so if one side doesn't want to end the conflict, it's going to be hard to end the conflict. Now, I think you're right that Iran is still trying in some form to calibrate its response, because they could probably do quite a bit of damage and kill quite a few Americans that are stationed at all these very small bases throughout the Middle East. There's quite a bit of missile defense in Israel. It's a small and, densely populated in some areas of the country. And so it's quite easy to, have enough air defense capabilities to largely protect the population, but that isn't so in these smaller U.S. bases in Syria, Jordan, Iraq in particular. And so if Iran really just wanted to do damage to the forces that it saw as attacking it, I think it could probably do a lot of damage to the United States and probably could hit some more provocative targets in Israel, maybe blowing up the Ben Gurion airport, hitting more Israeli ports, oil refineries, although they have hit some of those, just straight up attacks on residential areas of Israel. I think Iran is probably still looking to find an exit here, because I think they understand that if the United States gets involved, they have absolutely no chance of winning this war. And so I think the Iranian kind of strategy they're taking right now is to do enough damage to Israel that forces Tel Aviv to not, make concessions or really make a deal, but to have a reasonable position and allow this war to at least fizzle out or end. I don't know if that's going to happen. I think we're looking at escalations for a few weeks to come here, and then American involvement, but I'm not the best at predicting here. I think the last time I talked to you, Robbie, I told you I didn't think that Israel was going to launch a war against Iran, largely because I didn't think they had to. I thought Israel, what they really wanted out of all this was they wanted Gaza, they wanted the West Bank, they wanted southern Lebanon, and they wanted southern Syria. And they were going to take all that without any Iranian interference. And so now if you look at the Middle East and you look at all these different fronts that Israel is fighting on, that many of their soldiers have been through multiple tours of deployment over the past 18 months in Gaza, in the West Bank, in southern Lebanon, in southern Syria. Maybe they are stretched a little thin, and this could get to the point where Israel does have to back down just on logistical purposes, that they're trying to fight two main wars at all the same time. And I do think that territorial expansion is probably the top priority for Tel Aviv, even over eliminating Iran as a threat. But I could be wrong about that calculation and what Netanyahu wants. There's some speculation that all of this is because Netanyahu's government was in trouble. There's a lot of debate in Israel and some very strong opinions over the ultra-Orthodox community's exemption from the military conscription policy in Israel. And there was some movement to undo that exemption and to force these, all Israelis to join the military, not just the more secular or the less Orthodox. And that was potentially going to collapse the Netanyahu coalition. And if that collapses, there's a potential that Netanyahu could go to jail. He is on trial, multiple trials for corruption in Israel. And so Netanyahu may see it as an impossibility for him to end this war and to keep his government together. And if that's the case, that's a lot of incentive to keep fighting.
You see, my very loose read, and this is really not my topic of expertise, but it seems like the situation has changed so much with Hezbollah and, Hamas. Not that Hamas is eliminated, but Hezbollah was probably the bigger threat. And it seems like we got a CIA asset in running that country who let us just go into the bases or Israel go into the bases and take equipment. So I don't think Israel's all that worried about Syria and Hezbollah at the moment. So I think that there's that change. I think the other big change is that maybe American public opinion or worldwide public support for Israel has fallen so much that at this point, Netanyahu is, I might as well be as aggressive as possible of enacting my strategic agenda because no one likes me anyway. So let's just get the really important things done. With that lead in, let's take the U.S. out of it for a second and let's just conceptualize a total fictional reality that the U.S. does not send most of this military equipment or it does not support Israel. And so Israel's just over there, and they're surviving on their own, surrounded by these Arab countries. Is Iran actually a threat to Israel? To what extent is Israel and Iran actually natural enemies? Is there any truth to the storyline that Iran wants to get a bomb so that they can be blowing up Israel? They want it just as a nuclear deterrent, or that they, are constantly funding terrorism in the region? To what extent is Iran actually an enemy? Forget us. Imagine we don't exist in this storyline at all, and it's just Israel and Iran out in the Middle East. Is Iran actually an enemy to Israel?
I think there would probably be some unpleasant rhetoric between the two countries, but I don't think Iran is launching an aggressive, undeclared war and trying to wipe out the Jewish state. It probably plays well in a religious, theocracy to go after and attack and condemn other religions. And so I don't want to make it out to be that the Iranians would just love the Israelis if the Americans weren't involved. But there are between 15 and 25,000 Jews that do live in Tehran. And so if, the Iranian goal was just to wipe out all the Jews, they would probably start with those first, right? So, that's a part of how I always look at this. I also think, look, if Israel is without the U.S. support, it is a fairly wealthy country. It does have a fairly large defense production base. It has the Mossad is a very effective intelligence and spy agency. And so Israel would still be a fairly strong country, and it may balance in power very well with Iran. And two countries in a region that have a fair balance of power may just decide that, the best situation going forward is, even if they are antagonistic rhetorically, they don't necessarily have to ever exchange blows, or, they could just leave it at that. And there was a time, even after the Iranian Revolution in 79, where Israel was helping to covertly ship weapons to Iran during the Iran-Iraq War. And so, yeah, Israel could get along with the Iranians. A large part of the reason that Israel doesn't get along with the Iranians is they felt like they needed basically a boogeyman in the Middle East to keep the Americans there. And they invented the nuclear threat in Iran, and that's what's been stirred up. I think if I just went outside, Robbie, and started asking people who has nuclear weapons, Israel or Iran, everybody's going to tell me Iran, when really it's Israel that has a couple hundred nuclear weapons. And so there's just such a misconception about this, and that entitles U.S. support. And I think that's so much the underlying cause of the issue here is that Israel wants American military support, largely for their territorial expansion, and to hype up this Iranian threat has allowed them to get tens of billions of dollars over the past couple of years from the United States to wage their wars.
All right, and then just to maybe strongman it the other way, is there any evidence to suggest that Iran is not just a boogeyman and that they would be more aggressive towards Israel if they had the power to do so, or you just think that's a nonsense storyline?
I generally think that's not the crux of Iran's geopolitical ambitions. For a long time, Iran was very antagonistic with the government of Iraq. Saddam invaded Iran and carried out some pretty horrific attacks against the Iranians. They have tensions, or at least had tensions, with the Saudis. And, there's issues with oil fields under the Persian Gulf and shipping lanes. And so I think most of Iran's geopolitical attention, without the U.S. involvement here, would be on the Gulf Arab states and not necessarily Israel.
All right. Now, one of the, there was a real criticism that when Gaddafi fell, it made it harder to really convince any dictator to give up their nukes, because that's what ended up. Gaddafi did it, and then that was it did not have a great ending for him. In this storyline, though, if Iran would actually rather play nice with Israel and rather play nice with the world, why is it even worth them continuously pursuing this agenda of having? There's plenty of oil in the country, and I guess they don't currently have nuclear power. I assume they're getting their power from other sources. Why wouldn't it just be beneficial for them to just walk away from the enrichment?
I mean, it's a good question. And honestly, this may be a case of miscalculation by the Iranians. And so, I guess to get into it, Iran's had a nuclear program for a long time. And I think their nuclear program was actually established after the U.S. coup in Iran that imposed the Shah on the country, and when Tehran was an ally of, London and Washington in the West. And so, it's not as if the Iranian mullahs took power in 79 and then decided that we have to start building nuclear reactors. This is key to Iran's sovereignty. The nuclear reactors existed before. Now, I think a part of it is national pride. If you have, fairly advanced nuclear program, and I mean that in the sense of energy, they've mastered the enrichment cycle. This is something that only a few other countries have done that don't have nuclear weapons. Germany, Japan, I believe South Korea, and Brazil also have all done this. They also have a fairly advanced radiological medical program, and so by enriching uranium up to 20 to 50%, they're able to make some fairly advanced medicines. And again, I think this is in part a source of national pride. And so asking them to give up that enrichment capability is asking them to dismantle what is effectively a part of their medical system, right? And also, at times they've been able to export some enriched uranium, and they made some money off of it. But I think the real calculation here from Tehran, Robbie, was they looked at what happened to Saddam Hussein, they looked at what happened to Muammar Gaddafi, and they kind of thought that if we don't want nuclear weapons, we don't want weapons of mass destruction, but if we maintain all the pieces capable, and these could all be used in civilian energy and medical nuclear programs, that we could one day make a nuclear weapon, this would keep Israel or the United States from attempting to carry out a regime change. Daniel McAdams, the head of the Ron Paul Institute, had a fairly funny and I think apt meme that he posted right after the Israeli attack. It's a picture of Kim Jong-un saying, "I told you should have made nuclear weapons." And I think that is probably the lesson that most countries around the world are going to learn here, that really the only way that you could prevent a Western regime change is not just to have a latent nuclear deterrent like Japan and Germany and Brazil have, but to have an actual nuclear weapon and to be able to tell your enemies, if you destroy my country, if you come after me, I will nuke your capital city. And that's the way that you keep a country like Israel from attacking you. And so I think that's going to be the lesson learned here. Now, some people have been mentioning that over the past few years, Iran has gone from enriching their uranium at 3.67% all the way up to 60%. And, it's easy to say that was a mistake, but to look at how that happened, I think it was actually quite reasonable for Tehran to do. And so initially there was the 2015 nuclear deal between the U.S. and Iran that capped Iran's nuclear program, and they agreed to only enrich uranium again to 3.67%. When Trump broke that agreement and reimposed sanctions, Iran started to scale up that a little bit in order to say, I think, two things. One, that way when you go back to Donald Trump, you could say, well, we'll agree to go back down to something. If you're only, enriching at 3.67% and you go to Donald Trump and you ask again to a nuclear deal, he's going to say, what do you give up? If I'm going to lift the sanctions, what are you going to do in exchange? And so I think a part of that was to have something to trade away to the United States. Additionally, over the past 5 years, Israel has carried out a lot of sabotage attacks, a lot of piracy against Iranian ships. They assassinated Iranian nuclear scientists. The head of the Iranian nuclear program, Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, was killed in Iran. They did a couple attacks with drones on Iranian nuclear facilities, some other acts of sabotage. And so as this happened, Iran also said, okay, well, in response, we're going to escalate our nuclear program. And I think this was a way for the Iranian government to respond to what Israel was doing without attacking Israel, without carrying out assassinations in Israel, without pirating Israeli ships. This was Iran's way of responding. Ultimately, it ended up, I think, backfiring and kind of playing into the propaganda of Tel Aviv and Washington about Iran. But at the time, I do think it seemed fairly reasonable response.
So the two might tie in. I very much so buy that the regime in power wants to remain in power, and that's their primary objective, and that having a nuclear deterrent might help them from being overthrown. in terms of national pride, which might also just buy into the image of, hey, this is a strong dictator and that's how you remain, the dictator. I would think what can thwart national pride is everyone being able to just live better lives because you can trade freely with other countries. And then in terms of, having, you were saying that the radiology and medicine relies on some of this nuclear technology. I don't know, for just in pursuit of peace, couldn't you have an outside company just supply enough for what would be for the medical lanes, or you'd end up with all the same claims of, hey, that could be used for nuclear materials?
Well, I guess the problem on kind of points 2 and 3, we'll start there, is that Iran didn't have a very advanced nuclear program. They were just producing nuclear energy, and the U.S. and Israel were hyperventilating that Iran was trying to build a bomb, and the U.S. started imposing sanctions on Iran. And so it's not as if before Iran had this, kind of advanced nuclear program, they were able to just act as a normal country and to free trade with other countries. And they could rely on, say, Russia or another country with an advanced nuclear program to sell them these radiological medicines. I mean, I agree with you. It should work that way. And that was kind of what the Iran nuclear deal, right, but I guess the JCPOA was meant to do.
And other characters start bitching you out and telling you how you can operate in your country, and you can be pretty quick to go, well, no, this is our country.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a part of it too, but just to say, the sanctions were there first. Iran was prevented from engaging in free trade first. The nuclear program and ramping it up was in part response to that, and in part to have something to trade away to the West, to the United States, in order to be welcomed back into the international economic order.
All right, and now in terms of, I remember Netanyahu, he's got that Bugs Bunny, 1 year away bomb in front of, I think it was the UN, or maybe it was in front of our Congress, but he's been making this pitch for a while that Iran absolutely wants a bomb. And then I guess I've been reading as of late, our own intelligence agencies have seemed to suggest that Iran is not interested in a bomb. I believe there was even a religious decree in the country not to pursue a nuclear weapon. I've heard Scott Horton explain to me that essentially, and it's what you were saying, they always want it to be kind of within range of being able to build one so that there's some level of a nuclear deterrent there without actually having the bomb. Give me the picture here. Has Iran actually ever been pursuing a bomb? And then I guess the next part we can go to is how the Obama deal actually functioned and why some people are saying it was actually a good deal. But why don't we just start with what is the evidence to say that Iran has not actually been pursuing a nuclear weapon or isn't actually interested in one?
Yeah, so at least since 2003, Iran definitely hasn't been pursuing a nuclear weapon. There's some evidence that Iran was not trying to build a nuclear weapon, but I guess trying to figure out the steps that they would need to take if they wanted to build a weapon prior to 2003. And that 2003 date is important because the reason Iran was doing that was not because of Israel, it was because of Saddam Hussein. And they shut down the program once Saddam was gone and was no longer a threat. And for people who say, well, why would you need to do that to Saddam? Saddam used pretty nasty warfare against the Iranians during the Iran-Iraq War, 8 years of gassing Iranian forces in Iranian cities and villages and things like that. And so there, was some evidence that Saddam was working on a nuclear weapon, not in the lead up to 2003, but prior to that. And so there's some speculation that maybe Iran was trying to figure out what it would take to build a nuclear weapon, so they knew what to watch out for from the Saddam government if they were trying to build a nuclear weapon, because Iran might feel they need to take action there. But either way, since 2003, there's no evidence that Iran has been working on or is even trying to build a nuclear weapon. The person who has done the best work on this is Gareth Porter. He has a fairly large archive at antiwar.com if people really want to go back through and look at all these, small details where he really proves the case and hammers it home. And Gareth says Iran was never working on a nuclear weapon. They never intended to build a bomb. But the U.S. intelligence community, this is very important, under both the Biden and now the Trump administrations, have assessed that Iran had not made the decision to weaponize their nuclear weapons program. And so they were not working on a bomb. And just today, CNN reported talking with four people familiar with the matter, including U.S. intelligence officials, who said that it would have taken Iran up to 3 years to build a bomb, and that's if they decided to build one, and that they hadn't done that yet.
And I know that I believe Tulsi Gabbard made a public comment about that the U.S. intelligence was that Iran was not looking to build a bomb.
Yep.
And then Trump just rebuked her and said, no, I believe that they were. Maybe you can give us a little bit more insight into what happened there.
Yeah, in March. So Tulsi Gabbard is the director of national intelligence, and whoever's in that role, and this year it's Tulsi, goes to Congress once a year and gives the intelligence community threat assessment to Congress. And they always ask the same questions, which is Iran working on a nuclear bomb? Is Russia going to attack? Is China going to attack Taiwan? And when they asked Tulsi this year, is Iran building a nuclear weapon? She gave the same reply as her predecessor, Avril Haines. No, they are not. So that was in March. And then Trump was asked about this on Air Force One, I believe yesterday, Monday, the 16th. And Trump said something along the lines of, I don't believe her. I don't care what she said. Just completely dismissive of Gabbard and his own intelligence community's assessment. And apparently that's in favor of what's being said by the Israelis. And we don't really have like a firm statement from Netanyahu. He said that Iran could have a nuclear weapon very soon and in short order. I think he said a matter of months. But that doesn't sound like, it sounds like he's disagreeing with Tulsi. And you would assume that the president would take maybe his own intelligence community's assessment here, but that's not what's happening.
All right. So before I get to my next question, why don't we take a second here and let's, squeeze a couple plugs in. Kyle, why don't you let everyone know where you've got your podcast and where people can find your other work?
Yeah, so I got a lot going on, Robbie. I am the opinion editor of antiwar.com. So if people want to check out the viewpoint section there, spotlight articles and viewpoints I curate every day. I'm the news editor over at the Libertarian Institute. I do some writing at judgenaps.com. And I have two shows, Conflicts of Interest, and my new show, The Kyle Anzalone Show, where I interview some of the really smart people who know a ton about foreign policy. Some people have, been in positions of government, things like that, to help me break down all the events going on around the world.
There you go. Busy man. And then aside from this, I got my personal podcast, Run Your Mouth. I also co-host Dave Smith's Part of the Problem. And then lastly, I'm out doing Porch Tour. I've got comedy shows. I'm a stand-up comic by trade when I'm not trying to learn more about all these things that are going on in the news. So you can catch all those dates at www.porchtour.com. This weekend, I've got a run in upstate New York and Canada. Next weekend, I'm doing a run through the Carolinas. And then the weekend after that, I've got Louisiana, Texas, Oklahoma City, and a headlining gig at the Secret Group, which is on their website. But all the other dates are at porchtour.com. All right. So next question I've got for you is maybe you could detail for everybody who it doesn't know as well as you do. From what I've heard, the Obama deal was actually pretty good. That people were getting in there, they were inspecting everything, and it was a well-working deal until Trump came in and ripped it up. And now Trump is essentially, or prior to this escalation, was essentially just trying to get back into the Obama deal and claim it as his own, and possibly a little bit better to go look how good of a negotiator I am. So maybe you can tell us about how much of a blunder Trump made when he got us out of the Obama deal, which seemed to, I guess, have the situation under control.
Yeah, I agree with you on your assessment on the Iran nuclear deal, the 2015 deal, or the JCPOA. It's also called the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which was an agreement between the U.S., Iran, and then other parties to the agreement were Russia, China, and the three European states, Germany, France, and the UK. And now the membership's important in this because as a part of the deal, they said, we're going to remove all the international sanctions on Iran, but there's a snapback mechanism where if a majority of the members of the parties of the agreement, and so there's 7, and a majority would be the U.S., France, Germany, and the UK, so the U.S. and 3 of our allies, if we all say that Iran is violating the deal, it is breaking out and trying to build a nuclear weapon, then all the international sanctions will snap back into place. And so that's one of the reasons why people said that this was a good deal, because effectively, if Iran was building a nuclear weapon, we can instantly resume all the sanctions on Iran. Additionally, Iran made some concessions up front. They shut down some of their nuclear centrifuges. They agreed to only enrich uranium to 3.7%. They put IAEA, so that's the International Atomic Watchdog Agency, their inspectors, their cameras were in their nuclear facilities, making sure that everything was going as according to the civilian program laid out in the JCPOA. And importantly, Iran, actually retooled its reactor that was producing the heaviest nuclear waste, which of course then could be refined into a weapon the fastest. And so they retooled that reactor and gave away quite a bit up front. In exchange, Tehran got international sanctions relief. And also, this is the biggest deal you hear from the Republicans. They got, I think, a few $1 billion in money, of their own money, back from the United States. So before the Iranian Revolution in 1979, the Iranian government was buying weapons from the United States. They had paid for some of those weapons up front. And then when the Iranian Revolution happened, the U.S. obviously didn't deliver those weapons to Iran, but they never gave the money back either. And so there were some international court rulings basically saying that, no, this is Iran's money. You can't just take the money and not deliver the weapons. And so a part of the JCPOA was the U.S. giving some of that money back to Iran. And when you would hear Trump talk about the piles of cash, and Glenn Beck talking about how this is funding terrorism all over the Middle East, they were talking about that money, Iran's money, that they were allowing Iran to have some of that back. And so that's why I think it was generally a good deal, because it did a few things. It ensured that Iran wasn't building a nuclear weapon, and a part of the deal, a part of all the parameters were, even if Iran decided tomorrow that they kicked out the inspectors, that they were doing everything they could to build a nuclear weapon, it would take at least a year for Iran to be able to do that. And quite realistically longer, because even if you're able to build and assemble a nuclear weapon, you really have to test one first and then build a delivery system. So there's more pieces to the puzzle than just having all the pieces to the puzzle. But even to get all those pieces, it would have taken Iran a full year to do under the JCPOA. So in 2018, when Trump withdrew from that deal, it's important to say that Iran didn't immediately start enriching uranium at a higher level. They actually went to the Europeans and they said, hey, if you're willing not to go along with the American sanctions, if you will allow us to do business with Europe, then we're not going to go outside of the JCPOA. We'll stay within it. It was only after a year of pleading with the Europeans to please try to stay in the agreement, even though the Americans left, and then the Europeans still refused to trade with Iran. It was only then that Tehran started to walk away from their commitments under the JCPOA and enrich uranium to a higher level, which actually was a part of the actual text of the JCPOA, which was if the United States, or it says a party, but it means the United States, reimposes sanctions on Iran, then Iran doesn't have to live by all of its commitments in the agreement either, which of course made sense. And one other important thing to note here is one of the first things the Trump administration sanctioned for Iran was the export of enriched uranium. And so while technically Iran probably could have found a way around these sanctions, and if they really wanted to get rid of the uranium they were spinning up with their centrifuges, and they could have exported, but by American own rules, we say that no countries can buy enriched uranium for Iran. And so the reason their stockpile in part built up was because the U.S. was preventing them from exporting any of it.
Awesome. So I think I covered all the questions of interest I had in terms of where we are at the moment. But before I let you go, if there are any other key details you think we're missing, or other things that you think you'd like people to know about what's currently going on.
Yeah, I guess one of those just kind of points to this whole story that I've only seen a little bit of coverage of, that I just want to highlight, is that Israel isn't allowing Israelis to leave the country. They've instructed airlines not to allow Israeli citizens to leave. And apparently, there was an argument between U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee and Netanyahu over if we're going to allow Americans to leave on Israeli flights. And so I think in part, Israel is very interested in keeping everybody there because it's a densely populated country. Their Ministry of Defense, Mossad headquarters, and other things are in densely populated areas of major cities. And so, they effectively have human shields, what they constantly condemn and blame Iran for doing.
Did they claim that it was for security purposes that they shut down the airport because Tel Aviv was under, a bomb risk?
Well, so yeah, but they are allowing 2 flights in every hour during daylight hours to Ben Gurion Airport, bringing what they claim are essential Israelis back into the country, even as it's under bombing. But they're not allowing Israeli citizens to depart on those flights. Now, they said that's because we don't want a bunch of people at Ben Gurion Airport, which could lead to a mass casualty event. But if you just allowed, ticketed people to enter the airport, that really shouldn't be a problem. And so it does seem to be an effort of trying to keep the Israelis from leaving the country. And, there could be a real immigration problem for Israel. There was a poll conducted in May that said like 40% of Israelis were considering leaving that country. It's not a very populous country to begin with. Demographics wise, there's not that many more Jews in, the borders claimed by Israel compared to Palestinians. And certainly they don't want large numbers of the Jewish population of Israel to permanently resettle outside the country. So I think that's part of it.
Is there opportunities to leave by boat or to cross into Egypt and then fly out? Like how on lockdown is the country? Or you might not know.
I don't know, like, what would happen if an Israeli tried to leave and to get to a third country. I guess you could probably cross the Israeli border with Egypt, but
a boat to Cyprus or something like that. I think
maybe
Mediterranean.
I know. I think Russia and Poland were both working with Jordan to get their citizens to cross that border in order to get them to fly out. And at least from the Russian statement, it didn't seem like they were very happy with the level of Israeli participation in helping the Russian citizens from leaving.
All right. Well, that's everything I had to ask you. Thank you so much for taking the time and filling in some of these details for us. Once again, why don't you plug your Twitter handle for everybody?
Yeah, I'm at Kyle Anzalone _. I'm like 40 followers right now, short of 9,000. So help me to get to that nice round number, and then I'll be on working on 5 digits. And Robbie, congrats on the new show. I love your analysis on Part of the Problem, so I'm sure I'm going to really enjoy this program as well. And everybody follow my and subscribe to my new YouTube channel, The Kyle Anzalone Show.
That rules. And then once again, I am a stand-up comic when I'm not doing this. You can follow me at Robbie the Fire. And if you want to check out any of my comedy, it's at Robbie the Fire. Just Robbie the Fire, all one word on YouTube. That is the show. Thank you so much for hanging out with us.